Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me for Singapore FinTech Festival coverage is Chris Brankin, CEO of TD Ameritrade Singapore, to discuss Apac retail trading trends. Chris, it's great to see you as always, though virtually this time. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Oh, great seeing you, Jill. And like we were saying just before coming on camera, it'd be nice to see you in person, but we'll have to make the virtual piece work this time.
I can't wait till 2021, believe me. What are the general demographics of the TD Apac retail trader right now?
Sure. Look, so I like to look at it in two different kind of aspects. So we talk about age. Our trader in the Apac region is a little bit younger than what we have from the U.S. side. So it's about 43 years old, tends to be male. More than 3/4 of our investors are male compared to female. A little more tech savvy, as we see a lot more mobile adoption from our customers, and the products they trade are a little bit different. So we are very heavily weighted towards derivatives, where more than 70% of our trades on a month-over-month basis are in fact options and futures, compared to less than 30% of equities, and that's almost the opposite of what we see in the United States.
Has there been any impact with COVID-19 on the local retail environment?
Well, absolutely. I think there's been a few different stages of it. You've had the stocks and the things that would be in favor from that work from home status that a lot of us have been on for most of 2019. And then you have the impacts that, from, basically whether it's consumer discretionary side or the retail spending, the impact Singapore a little bit different than maybe the United States, because the Singapore would be reliant on a lot of tourism, as in fact, where Singapore has done a fantastic job in being able to control the virus. Essentially, Singapore has shut their borders to tourists, to outside retail spending. So definitely has hurt some of the small businesses, restaurants, and retail shops here in Singapore. But it is something that we see a little light at the end of the tunnel as our cases are going down and down, and we're starting to get into that phase 2, phase 3 of opening up the economy here in Singapore.
So, Chris, why are you seeing from retail traders looking at U.S. markets? Why is there growing interest from Apac retail traders into the U.S. markets? If there's this big dichotomy of how the economy is opening up in Apac versus what we're seeing in the U.S.
Yeah, look, so that's an interesting question. So, and it's been posed to me a couple different times. Like, why is there so much relative strength in terms of what's happening in the U.S., especially the U.S. stock markets? So I think a good way to look at that is markets are forward-looking. And if you look at U.S. markets and the amount of money that the Fed and other central banks around the world has kind of pumped into the economies to get to where we're at, I think there's painted this really strong picture for the U.S. going forward into 21. And kind of where we've been able to get to in 20, even though we've basically changed the way we live since probably March or April in the U.S. So as we look at that, I think the valuation it's what I like to call it's the best game in town. So people are moving towards this. We grind higher and higher every month. We've seen record highs, almost month after month on the U.S. markets. And I think that's where we see this continued interest, and it continues to drive our traders here at TD Ameritrade in Singapore for adding additional market exposure to the U.S. because of it is the best game in town right now.
And Chris, I want to ask you one more question, because I meet with JJ Kinahan, one of your colleagues on the U.S. side of the business, when we talk about the Investor Movement Index, the IMX trends. I've been covering this, I think it's over 11, 12 years at this point, which tracks retail investor trading trends. Tell us about November, which was especially interesting because we had the U.S. election, of course, and there's a lot going on in the U.S. that impacts international investors.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Investor Movement Index, as you said, we've had that for over 10 years, but we rolled out the Asian version of that, less than 2 years ago. So very similar kind of, what we see a lot of our customers trading. But there are some slight differences, but the trends have remained relatively the same. And I will say for the last 7 months in a row, we've seen our customers at TD Ameritrade here in Singapore adding new market exposure. So they are been net buying positions, almost, very heavily tech weighted for most of this rally. But we've seen a lot more breadth to that rally, over this kind of the November timeframe. Some differences that we see from our Asian customers trading versus our U.S. population is we've seen the net new buys from Singapore and Southeast Asia. Apple has been one of our number one added new products, even though we've seen lots of other areas where people, I think Apple has seen its rises throughout the year. We've seen now more recently our customers here in Singapore. We're also are buying kind of the health with Teladoc Health, Planeteer Technologies, and then as we're doing this through Zoom video communications and also Square have been some of the differentiators in what we see our Asian customers buying versus our total U.S. population.
And Chris, that's a great segue. It's part of my last question. I've spent time with you. I've spent time with your family on the ground, and time zones are always a challenge. We're doing this right now in my garage. I'm 13 hours behind. You're 13 hours ahead. How do you deal with clients? What do they deal with day to day? Because regardless of COVID-19, these time zone challenges are going to exist.
Sure. No. And I think, kind of going back to what we see our customers trading is really important to that. Because we see our customers trading derivative focused, we see people putting on, more kind of risk defined strategies in the options market or using futures to hedge their overall positions. And they're kind of able to do this and basically, as I say, sell a spread and go to bed. Because then you have, and the futures markets kind of trade around the clock, so you can trade towards those opportunities that happen throughout the course of whether it's the U.S. presidential elections or it's something that happens in Europe or it's something in China. All these things you're able to take advantage of on a 24-hour market like we see in futures, and that's just kind of how it is really, I think, impacts what our customers are trading is due to that time zone. But now, as we've seen over the last few months, is people are more and more engaged throughout the course of the night here in Singapore, which we do have people in the Chicago and our Omaha offices that actually support them from a trading standpoint around the clock. So we see more engagement throughout a larger time zone, just simply from people are being at home and are more engaged, and markets have gone higher and higher. And now as we head into the Santa Claus rally.
Chris, great to see you as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.